What's up, YouTube? Today we're going to talk about pre-exhaustion training principle. We're going to cover what and how it is done, why people do it, and more importantly, what does science say about it? Whether is it good, bad, or worse, advantages and disadvantages. Let's get started. So what does pre-exhaust exactly mean? Or what does it mean to pre-exhaust a muscle in weight training? It's basically to pre-fatigue a target muscle or a group of muscles by performing an isolation exercise before doing heavy compound exercises. Easy example, doing flies before bench press, doing leg extensions before squats, raises before shoulder presses, and so on. Some may argue that doing triceps before bench press or biceps before back is also pre-exhausting, but this only applies if your main goal is to train the triceps or biceps, not chest or back. This pre-exhaustion training, it must revolve around the same muscle, otherwise it'll fall into a category of weak muscle priority principle. So it must stay in the same group. And up until the early 2000s, there were some hypotheses among bodybuilding communities that pre-exhaustion training method could be superior when it comes to training for hypertrophy. We'll see what science research says about that later in this video. But first, what are the major reasons for doing pre-exhaust? If you've been hitting the gym, and at least at some point, you've probably had situations where you can no longer do more reps because your supporting muscles got tired first. Like triceps giving out before the chest during bench press, forearms and biceps giving out while doing lat pull downs, and so on. And that's quite natural because chest and back are much bigger muscles than your arms. Thus, they are stronger, meaning they can go on longer than your arms. But there's still some left in your chest and back. And this is when you typically do drop sets, partials, maybe move on to an isolation exercise where your supporting muscles from compound movements are less involved and you can focus better on your major muscles. What pre-exhaustion allows you to do is for your major muscles to be able to go to failure about the same time with your supporting muscles because you've pre-exhausted them. And additionally, in physiology standpoint, because you're performing an isolation exercise before compound movements, and note that the major benefit of isolation movement is that you can focus better on the target muscle without the involvement of supporting muscles. It activates the neuromuscular connection to the desired muscle for increased mind-muscle connection and overall muscle fibers being utilized, meaning higher activation. However, because you have pre-fatigued your major muscle with isolation exercise, your overall strength will be limited and the load volume in compound movement will be lighter than the traditional method. To sum it all, the advantage of pre-exhaustion is 1, your major muscles reach failure around the same time with your supporting muscles, so your time under tension is equalized among the muscle groups being used. And 2, which I believe is the most beneficial reason, is that you get to train in relatively lighter weight or lighter load volume. And I'm sure some of you are going, wait a minute, how is training with lighter weights could be a good thing? Well, first, let me explain that with scientific evidence. A study from Journal of Sports Science Medicine in 2016 by Dr. Suarez and colleagues took 14 participants of 25 years or older who have experience in resistance training and had them perform a bench press by itself and another time after applying pre-exhaustion principle. And the findings were quite interesting. Pre-exhaustion method resulted less in total load volume, meaning how much and how heavy the participants could lift. However, the activation in pectoral muscle fibers were much higher than the traditional method. In other words, although the participants had to lift lighter weight due to pre-exhausting the chest before the bench press, but since the neuromuscular ways were better activated, the higher muscle numbers of fibers were recruited during the bench press. So basically, pre-exhaustion resulted lighter weights, but higher muscle activation. But as you can see from this graph here, by the end of the set or the exercise, the levels of blood lactate concentration were almost similar between pre-exhaustion and traditional training methods. And other studies published in Strength and Conditioning Journal in 2017 and Southampton University in the UK in 2014 showed similar findings. So if the outcome is similar, what's the point? Yes, the level of blood lactate concentration means that both training methods ended up yielding almost the same training results. In other words, by pre-exhausting the pecs before the bench press, the overall load volume had to be decreased than if they had performed the bench press when the pecs were fresh. But since the pecs were already pumped, full of blood, and fibers were activated, higher numbers of muscle fibers were recruited, and thus possibly higher mind-muscle connection and higher concentration on the pecs during the bench press. In layman's terms, if the traditional way of training chest, let's say bench press A, flies B, resulted in C, pre-exhaustion basically did B to A, then to C. The process may be different, but yielding results is more or less the same. So the results are the same, but how can we take advantage of it? As I mentioned earlier as to why I think using lighter weights could be a good thing is injury prevention. I've injured my knees, ankles, and adductors when I played football in college, and it was one of the worst moments in my life. So preventing injuries are one of my top concerns. And since I can get the similar metabolic stress level from pre-exhausting, I don't have to go super heavy on leg presses or squats. And same on the shoulders too. If you're training regularly for some time, some form of shoulder injury will always take place. But pre-exhausting can help you take some of the stress load off your shoulders when you're doing heavy presses. And another major benefit that I've experienced myself and from coaching clients is that pre-exhausting can help to get higher mind-muscle connection. And you know, when you just started training, you're trying to go through the exercise with proper forms and motion, but don't get the connection that much. I think pre-exhausting helps speed that process up, getting that sweet connection. The level of mind-muscle connection can only be increased with frequency of training, so it will come in time, but it does take some time to get there. But by pre-pumping the major muscles, and that way you don't have to worry too much about lifting too heavy, you can concentrate more on your forms as well as that connection to your muscles without having to worry about stabilizing the heavy load. So in terms of hypertrophy training, meaning if your goal is to put on muscle size, pre-exhaustion can be a good tool, but like everything else, there's always a downside of it too. Obviously, because it forces you to lift relatively lighter weight in compound movements or probably major exercises, muscular strength gain will not be sufficient. There's no doubt to get stronger, you must always strive to lift heavier, and pre-exhaustion method may not be suitable for that goal. Also, another study from Front Physiology Journal in 2019 concluded that although pre-exhaustion training can decrease total training volume while maintaining results in strength and hypertrophy compared to traditional style, the traditional style may be more optimal if the goal is to decrease the body fat. This makes sense since pre-exhaustion can seem to decrease the overall workout intensity, thus caloric expenditure may be decreased compared to the traditional all-out compound movement priority style training. So to wrap it all up, if your main goals are in the ranges of hypertrophy, injury prevention, and higher connection, pre-exhaust could be a good training tool to use, while if your goals are in the ranges of strength and power gains and body fat loss, the traditional ways seem to be the way to go. The simplest way of pre-exhaust training is to do an isolation movement first and then to do a compound movement. As simple as doing flies before bench, raises before presses, leg extensions before squats. But if you're intermediate or advanced lifters, and you can take this even further, as you may have seen from my leg day workout vlog, I'll put up the link here if you haven't watched it yet, I do almost all isolation movements on my legs, from extensions, curls, abductions, and adductions before I move on to compound movements. Obviously, at this point, my legs will be pumped, full of blood all around, and I may have to lower the weights on compound exercises, but activation is through the roof. For chest, you can try cable flies lying down, 2 dumbbell pullovers, then move on to presses. For shoulders, do lateral, front, and rear raises, and then do presses. You have to put your ego aside when you do compound movement, but trust me, you'll be able to get much better connection this way if you weren't before. And sometimes when I'm in between sessions and I only have limited time for a workout, I'll compound it, like do flies and immediately do presses, and pullovers straight to pull downs, leg curls, and immediately stiff leg deadlifts, and so on. Try this way too, and you'll feel deep soreness the next day. So that's it for pre-exhaustion training information. I hope it helped, and Like anything else in fitness and bodybuilding, there's no one true answer. These are all tools that we can use to break through plateaus and push yourselves in different ways. So do try them out for yourselves and let me know how it went in the comment section down below. I'd love to hear from you guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.